Hey everybody, Daniel Landerman here. Thanks for coming by the drawing desk and checking out what I'm going to be working on today. We're going to get into a brush pen sketch, working in a moleskin sketchbook. We'll throw in a few gel pens just for the hell of it. And everything I use will be linked in the description below, so you'll be able to head over to Amazon and grab a few for yourself if you're interested in checking them out. And with that, let's get into it.
So anyone that follows me on Instagram has probably seen this image. So I thought I would share the full video. It's only about a half hour long, I think. It was a fairly quick sketch, but I thought it might be helpful for someone. If nothing else, maybe it's just fun to watch something like this happen. So it's fairly straightforward, right? There's no really big secret to what I'm going to do here. As you can see, I'm not doing a prelim sketch. I'm not starting with pencils. I'm going right into it with the pen. I am using a Kaime weasel hair Sumi brush pen. I love this one. I think Kaime makes the best brush pens, in my opinion. They have kind of a longer bristle on them, which gives a bit more control over the line work. You can go from very fine lines to very large marks. And also because they're a natural bristle, right? They're not synthetic. They have, for me, the perfect amount of spring. And I love this one because it easily fits in my pocket. They also make, I believe it's the Kaime Natural Hair Sumi brush pen, which has a nice long handle similar to an actual brush, but not as easy to just stick in your pocket and carry around. So I'm always looking for things that are kind of convenient to take around with me in certain situations. Sometimes I might have, my etcher field case or whatever, and in which case I can carry a bunch of pens. But in this case, it's great to just be able to take like 3 pens and my sketchbook and know that I can kind of do whatever I might want to do with those. I do tend to start with the head first. Once in a while, if it kind of feeds and supports the concept I have, I might, when drawing in pen, I might start with the hand or the foot or something. But usually, to me, the head kind of sets the tone for what I usually have rolling around in my brain. But it's just a personal preference. I don't think it really matters much where you start. The important thing is to start. And sometimes you just have to see where it takes you. I don't always have a very clear concept when I'm doing this kind of thing, right? When I'm drawing straight in pen. It's not always about the exact concept. Sometimes it's simply about, one, the practice of being decisive, putting down marks, not being able to take them back, and two, sometimes it's just about being able to put fun marks down, shapes that I really like, right? So I'll oscillate between some nice, slow, methodical lines, quick, sketchy lines, thin lines, thicker marks, whatever I kind of feel the image needs. So just kind of poking around and making sure that I know what I'm going to put down next, right? It's not always about just never picking up your pen or something like that. That's fun too sometimes, but I'd rather do my best not to screw it up, which is always a risk, right? A lot of people have asked lately, how to go about practicing something like this because they're always afraid of screwing up their sketch. And part of it is you just can't really be that afraid of screwing up, It's just a sketch. it's fine. And the more you do, the better you'll get at it. There's no shortcut in that sense. And I wish there was, sort of. Maybe not, because that would make it a lot easier and then a lot more people would do it. But there really isn't a shortcut. And what's funny is that if you do draw straight in pen, it's quicker, right? I think this whole sketch from beginning to end was like 27 minutes, something like that. But to get to this point, the amount of practice you have to put in, the amount of anatomy study, and I mean, not just anatomy, right? The different accoutrements that she has, getting at least a basic understanding of how cloth falls and some concept design that you're kind of doing on the fly. Getting all that stuff under your belt takes time, and it's not easy. That right there, one of the strengths of the brush pen in terms of being able to really vary the textures and the marks. I love smudging the ink. I'll use it all the time, and I'll use it a few more times even in this image. And it just gives a nice variety, allows me to kind of put a little more artsy flair, I guess, into it. And that's one of those aspects I was talking about in terms of just thinking about marks that I feel like making, right? So it's a combination in an image like this of doing my best to, put some good anatomy in there, doing my best to get at least a semblance of accurate cloth. I just don't want it to look wrong. That's my main focus. And then marrying that with hopefully some really nice mark making, which is just one of my absolute favorite things. When I see an image that has this beautiful line work, beautiful calligraphic marks, that makes me really happy. Not gonna lie. You'll see here, as I get into the hand, again, it's not about fleshing out every little detail. It's just indication. Again, this is a sketch. It's not, and I use that in that word sketch in the sense that it's not a fully detailed, fleshed out drawing. I don't mean to belittle it, because I know I do see a lot of people that kind of get a little bit in a huff about me calling these warm-up sketches, right? And I don't mean that like, oh, this is just a throwaway piece. That's not it at all. When I do a warm-up sketch, I take it very seriously, and it's simply the first sketch of the day. And it's important in terms of kind of shaking the rust off, warming up your hands, warming up your brain, right? Warming up your eyes, making sure that you're seeing the way that you want to be seeing as you get into art that might be more serious. In my case, art for work, right? Which is serious. I can't really screw that stuff up. I can't just submit a bad sketch and be like, I'll do better next time, right? Like, got to be consistent. So that's where I'll do something like this, kind of first thing in the morning. Because one, drawing with pen, first thing in the morning, cold, not easy. But it does kind of start to lock your brain into place and gets you to kind of warm up to making the right decisions, hopefully seeing the form properly, right? And that's one of the big benefits, I think, of not just pen sketching, but also doing warm-up sketches, making decisions along the way. So, I'm kind of like, oh, hey, yeah, I feel like this needs some more shape. So let's put some kind of pheasant type feathers on this. And because that'll give a silhouette that to me is a little more interesting. So using these marks, I'm thinking of accent darks, right? Where the darkest darks would be in an image if it were a full illustration. I'm thinking about how these marks describe the form, right? And are they wrapping around? Are they going across? Are they cross contours? Are they following the silhouette contours? And all these things I'm kind of wanting to consider as I move forward. And really starting to think about the overall silhouette of the figure and the rest of the gesture, because that kind of dictates the mood of, her mood. One of the things that you will almost never see me do unless it actually supports the story is do a very objectified or sexualized pose, right? Not without context. You will see me, obviously, draw a lot of nude figures because I don't really see anything wrong with that personally. It's a pretty natural state of being, arguably more natural than being clothed, right? But it's also, you don't need to make them weak in any way. I always make it a point to make them as strong as I can because that's more intriguing to me. Totally placed the lines wrong here. Realize it'd be cooler if her elbow was kicked up a bit and her hand was on her hip. So you'll see as I am correcting it here. And that's fine. Again, it's a sketch. It's okay to place some lines wrong. You can either use them, totally work them in. I could have worked some kind of stripes into her clothing and you never would have known the difference. But I also don't mind showing a little bit of the humanity behind the artist's hand. So while, yes, she's not wearing a whole lot, I also don't want her to appear weak, right? If we see a beautiful person walking around or at the coffee shop or at the bar or whatever, they're kind of beautiful no matter what they're doing, right? They don't have to be doing something sexual to be beautiful. So that's always something to keep in mind when you're considering posing, storytelling, character design. They can just be standing there and they're beautiful no matter what. It really doesn't matter. Whatever pose you put them in should hopefully support their character and the story above everything else, Nothing wrong with drawing sexy pictures too. If you want to do that, do it, but there's no point hiding it, right? I think that's when we get into trouble as artists, as male artists, right? Is when we start kind of making everything very sexual, but trying to hide behind some kind of no, that's just how her character is, and no one's buying it, right? As soon as we try and hide stuff, then we're getting into some not good territory. So you can see, this brush was drying out just a little bit. I probably went a little too long without using it. I ended up reconstituting the brush, just dipping it in water, putting the cap on and letting it sit for a while. But because it was drying out a little, I thought I'd use that to my advantage, right? Because I love that dry brush mark. There's kind of no other way to get it. Normal pens aren't going to give it to you. You can use an actual paintbrush and probably have a little more control, but it's not quite as convenient, right? So just wanting to describe the form of the cloth a little bit more and give some more texture. One of the things I wanted to do on this piece was keep it a little looser and more artistic, I guess you could say. I'd like, I'm just a huge fan of sketches. I don't necessarily think anything's better for being detailed out, rendered out, fleshed out. I love the kind of instant mood and impressions that you get from kind of looser, more raw sketches. Maybe I'm a little biased because I work as a sketch artist. That's kind of my job. But, or maybe I work as a sketch artist because I just love the look of raw sketches. You can see how much that smudging does, right? It adds variety, which is a key part of image making, right? If you use the same tool and you use the same marks throughout the entire image, then there's no reason for people to explore and look around the image, right? They can just look at the face and know that they've pretty much seen the whole thing because you haven't varied your tools, you haven't varied your marks, and it's just something to keep in mind. It's not to say that you have to do that all the time, because you can create interest and variety through texture as well. And there are ways to kind of create textures, right? Hatching, cross-hatching, pointillism, however. So you could use, theoretically, one pen and just find different ways to kind of create some different textures and some areas of intrigue. In my case, I really love to kind of mix at least a couple pens together, and you'll see when I bring in the gel pens, the kind of fine lines that they add. I don't know if all these marks were necessary, but it's just a little, try and think of it in kind of layers of detail, right? The first pass is sort of the first layer, and then maybe if there's a chance for me to sort of add something or slightly correct some shapes that I feel will change the initial impression, I'll kind of come back in and work on some of those. The trick is not to just kind of doodle and dab around trying to figure out what to do next, right? If you're searching for what to do next, then chances are the drawing's done or the painting's done, right? If you don't know what you need to do, don't do any more. You know, maybe 2 days down the line, something will occur to you. And, oh, you know what? This could really use blah, blah, blah. By all means, go back in, do some stuff. But if you're kind of just searching around and starting to make marks because you don't know what else to do, that's a good time to stop. Now with this, as you can see, obviously, even just to indicate anatomy loosely, you need to have some decent understanding of it. There's kind of no way to avoid that. So I recommend always kind of brushing up on your anatomy. Now we've got a Sleechy 0.25 millimeter gel pen. And this, along with that Kaime brush pen, are linked in the description below, so you can get them right off of Amazon if you want. And you can see it just gives me some nice, really fine lines, very uniform lines, which add just a little different mood to some of it. And it doesn't take much, but it's enough to kind of bring in an added layer of interest into what we're looking at. And I'll just sort of drag it around the cloth a little bit, just to create some different shapes and different marks. Then we break into the high-tech C mica gel pens.
Yeah.
Almost. Soon. Maybe getting a few flyaways or something. So here's our high-tech C mica. It's like a kind of a golden orange. I got it in like a variety pack, so I don't know, couldn't tell you the exact color, but it's not an orange and it's not a yellow, so it sits kind of somewhere in between. I like it because it sort of gives a little bit of a henna type of quality, so I can do all this stuff on the skin, and it, you know, maybe harkens back to some henna kind of designs, which is always fun. And what I like about doing stuff like this, even though I don't have any tattoos and I probably will never get a tattoo, but I love putting these kinds of, whether they're tattoos or makeup or some kind of body paint, on figures, is it allows me to just describe the form a little more, you know, to turn them around the form, and that I think is pretty fun.
But that was also.
And it also can kind of help to describe the different shapes, right? From the rib cage to the hips, to the legs, and all of that. It's kind of fun to just follow the natural contours of the figure. And it just adds kind of another design element, and can give a sort of, in this case, kind of a ritual feel to her. You know, I see her as being some kind of like a shaman or something like that. Were druids only men? I don't know if they were only men. I'll have to look that up. But some kind of a shaman or wizard, or I don't want to say a witch because that has such a bad connotation, but essentially, you know, tribal witch. But like a badass good guy tribal witch. Not obviously not a gnarly evil witch. She seems like she might be a bit of a hard ass though, so like a good guy, but Brooke's no nonsense kind of a woman. I'm cool with that. So I love playing with these kinds of designs, getting into textiles and stuff like that, and I'll sort of skirt between you know, really detailing this stuff out and indicating it, right? If we start getting into folds in clothing, wrinkles, whatever, then I'm not necessarily going to take the time to figure out what exactly is this design and how does it work going around the folds and all that. So that's the time to just kind of indicate something. But hopefully I have a good enough understanding of the form, right, to be able to indicate it convincingly. So that's something to bear in mind. Even if you're doing a simplified sketch, to be able to indicate something with any kind of credibility, you do have to have a pretty good understanding of how the material or how that form works and how light works on that form, to understand sort of where to catch the contours. Now I'm half Indian, right? My mom is from India, so I think that's where I I kind of gravitate toward these sort of paisley henna designs, as well as I love Japanese textiles, and and a lot of the Middle Eastern textiles, and lace. Like, I love those kinds of shapes. I think they're really interesting, and can add a lot of layers of visual interest to something. So I tend to blend sort of all those textile aesthetics together, to kind of create, I don't know, something that I just find really fun to draw. Right, so as simple as the coloring is on this, I could come in with like a Copic marker and it wouldn't smear any of this. I could do some tone and all that stuff, but oftentimes I like to really just let the marks and the lines sing, speak for themselves. Start getting tone in, and kind of starts to maybe distract from those things a little bit. A lot of these designs, I'm just making them up on the fly. So, but I enjoy it. A lot of fun. But it's also because I pay attention and I study textiles every now and then, so that I can do something like this on the fly. I wouldn't be able to do this if I didn't kind of have some kind of understanding and visual cues to go off of. Because I'm not using any direct reference for any of this as I'm drawing. It's all stuff that I've kind of studied and referenced in the past, so I have them in my mental library, and I'm able to kind of dip into that and pull things out as needed. But it's always good to kind of brush up on that stuff too. Study it all for a little bit, at least. Some of this is just kind of seeing what the image needs, right? What kind of shapes do you think it needs? What kind of marks? What kind of lines? And just rolling with it. Then as I get to the far side, it's more just kind of indicating, because we've got more fleshed out designs on the near side of her clothing, and all I need to do is kind of indicate some others, and our brain fills in the rest, assuming that maybe it's symmetrical, maybe not. So there we have it. I hope you enjoyed seeing a bit of the process. Again, there's no crazy big secrets here as we get into all this stuff. A lot of it is just practicing, just keep chipping away at all the knowledge that'll kind of help you get to this place. Anatomy, doing studies of clothing, doing studies of jewelry, doing studies of textile design, henna designs, tattoo designs, just wildlife in general, to get ideas for different shapes and things like that. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Cheers.